So often, I'm sure you see this a lot, Dr. Kim, but it's not even always these big, extravagant moments. It's not always a
Yeah,
betrayal or leaving for another partner. It's those small little flames. I refer to them as the small flames in the room that you're letting. And those are the little issues, the frustrations, the bitterness, the lack of forgiveness, the lack of emotional support, lack of consideration, the little things that eventually grow into a big flame. And in the first chapter of my book, I ask the question because I think it's very important to truly sit and consider, if you had little flames in your real home that were burning, would you allow them to just sit? Or would you do everything you could to get rid of them or to
sure.
solve them or to find an understanding of where they're coming from? Wouldn't you do everything in your power to save it? Why not do the same for the most important relationship in your life?
Better sex in your marriage without the awkward guessing or the world's ick. The His and Her Sexy Bundle shows you how to romance your spouse the way they actually feel loved. 5 fun Christian safe tools to spark connection, deepen intimacy, and seriously upgrade the bedroom. His way and her way. And right now, it's yours for a donation of any amount to Awesome Marriage. But hurry, this bundle won't last forever. Grab the His and Hers Sexy Bundle today. Well, welcome to today's Awesome Marriage Podcast. We are kicking off February with a great guest. Maesta is a writer, a speaker, a podcast host, and she's known for saying the hard things gently. She's a trusted voice in relationships. She reaches millions through her popular podcast, Living Easy with Lindsay, where she hits on everything from marriage and intimacy to friendships, motherhood, and faith. Lindsay's newest book, Don't Burn Your House Down, invites couples to stop self-sabotaging their relationships and learn how to protect what matters most. She lives in Nashville with her husband and 2 boys, but she's in the studio with us today. So let's go to the studio right now. Lindsay, welcome to Awesome Marriage Podcast. It's so good to see you and meet you. I'm excited about the new book. It's a topic that as a counselor, I see in the counseling room all the time. So I think it's so relevant for really people in all seasons of marriage. One of the things that bothers me the last few years, we've seen these people who've been married 30 and 40 years getting divorces. And it's like, why are you doing that? How did you get there? What happened in there? So I think it's really good. So thanks for being here. And you're married and got 2 boys, and so that's great. And you all live in Nashville, is that right?
Yes, we're in Nashville. Yeah, thank you so much for having me on, Dr. Kim. I'm very excited to talk about this book. It has been my heart and soul for the past 2 years. As you know, it's a journey.
You
So I'm
yes,
very thankful. But yes, we're in Nashville. We've been here for about 4.5 years, originally from Albuquerque, New Mexico.
oh,
So
wow,
a big shift. And I've been married for about next month, 14. Well, by the time this airs, we'll be married for 14 years.
great.
And yeah, and we have 2 boys, ages 8 and 10. They keep me on my toes. They're busy, busy, very like all boy, and have been from day one. Yeah.
That's great. Did you grow up with brothers?
Nope. I grew
So
up with
this
all girl cousins. Yeah, it's a huge shift. Jesus was
it
like,
is.
we're going to sanctify.
Guess what? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. No, that just
Yeah.
I've got 3 grandsons and 2 granddaughters, and I love them all, but they're so different in so many
Mhm.
ways even the boys are all different. They have their own gifts and abilities, and
Yeah.
it's just fun to watch kids as they grow up and mature. And you're saying before we went live that you begin to have a different kind of relationship with them as they get older,
Mhm.
and that's really cool.
It's really incredible how 2 children, 3, 4 children raised in the same home can be so incredibly different. And it's
Yes,
really fun to just watch their personalities blossom and emerge. And it is, I mean, within our marriage, and we'll talk about this, it's really something that causes you to evaluate your selfishness, to evaluate your own convictions, to
mm,
ensure that you have a solid foundation of values in the home, to know what you're pointing toward, all of those things. That's kind of the season that we've been in recently as they're getting a little bit older and wanting to branch out
sure.
more and be more independent. And Jesse and I are both very different. We were raised very differently, my husband. And so it's been a little bit of an experiment, but I think
Hmm.
that a lot of the people in my world, our neighbors in the same age range, are kind of navigating some of the same things right now.
Oh yeah, it's things that are normal, sometimes are really hard too, but they
Yeah.
are normal. But I think God just grows us through all of that as
Mhm.
we watch our kids and presents new challenges and trying to be great parents.
Yeah.
But it's a fun journey. We loved every year that our
Mhm.
kids were growing up, and the same with our grandkids. So it's
Mhm.
really neat.
Mhm.
So let's kind of get into the book. Don't burn your house down. How'd it come to life? What do you want couples that pick up the book, that read it? What do you want them to get out of it?
Yeah, gosh. So Don't Burn Your Own House Down is something that started about 10 years ago when I really leaned into marriage and relationships and wanting to understand it. And what prompted that for me, to be honest, was fear of divorce. I
Mm,
grew up in a divorced home. My parents were divorced when I was 4 years old, and it was a
wow.
pretty tumultuous divorce. It was not amicable by any means. So we had police picking us up from each house because they were unable to
Oh,
arrange. And it's very interesting now as an adult because they're such reasonable people that it shows really how divorce can make such a mess of
yeah,
you and of a person, and can cause you, they always say you don't divorce who you married, and that was true for my parents. And now seeing them and seeing the, I guess, just the disarray that it created in their lives and in our lives, it's something that I just didn't want for myself. Now, I don't believe
sure,
that divorce is the ultimate sin, but I do, by any means. I know that there are reasons for it,
sure.
with abuse or adultery, but I think that there are also a lot of people who just want an escape. They just want an out. They want an easier experience. And a lot of the time, we're a little bit delusional, if I'm honest, to think that it makes things significantly easier. So
Yes,
I that was one of the first things that prompted it. And then also I just really leaned into this because I see on social media now, and even in normal day-to-day conversations, this focus on just get divorced. If it's hard, just get divorced. Or comments, of my husband didn't stuff my stocking, which yes, is very hurtful. And if it's a continued pattern, can really feel like thoughtlessness and carelessness. But is that if the first stuffing stocking that wasn't stuffed, it's a tongue twister. If the first stocking that wasn't stuffed gives reason for hundreds of people to comment on a video and say, well, just divorce him. He obviously doesn't care. I think we jump so quickly to this instead of
hmm,
fighting for a covenant, fighting for communication, fighting for relationship. And I just value it so much. And I've watched marriages redeemed from really deep brokenness and betrayal, and I've seen how Jesus can restore. And so it's just my heart to remind people, like, even in today's world, it is good to fight for your covenant. It is godly and biblical to
absolutely.
fight for your covenant. It is okay to stay in one marriage and to grow together and to outgrow one another and then grow back together, and to be married essentially to the same person 3 or 4 times by just relearning who they
Mm,
are, instead of leaving and dividing your family just because it's tough. That tough does not mean impossible. And so
right.
I think that's the premise and the heart of what I do.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting that I was kind of thinking back and really, when I first started counseling couples, I mean, at that time, even then, divorce was still kind of a stigma. It was
Yeah.
kind of like, it wasn't probably as much as it was maybe 10 or 15 years before that, but still kind of a stigma. And I think social media, like you said, somebody jumps on and they get a divorce. I mean, we throw
Mhm.
that word around so easily now.
Mhm.
And I think people are easily influenced in what the covenant, the commitment part of it. I
Mhm.
think we've lost sight of that in a lot of ways. And like you said, working through the hard things, realizing, okay,
Mhm.
what do we want this marriage to be? And how do we get there? Because it's not, you
Absolutely.
can't just sit back and it's not going to just happen.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is glamorized. And I think that's something I want. Again, I'm not making divorce the enemy. I think what I want to do is just give hope to people that my
Yes.
husband and I are 14 years in, and gosh, we have been through a lot. It has not been an easy ride. He's a great man, but we have a lot of differences. And
Yeah.
when I talk to my neighbors on the street, it's so refreshing for them to hear that even though I'm writing a marriage book, that we're going through the same stuff. And that's what I think makes Don't Burn Your Own House Down a little bit different, because I share the mess of our lives. I share vulnerability. I share a lot of the areas where we were ready to kind of throw our hands up. But
Hmm.
what drew us back was not only the knowledge that God has made us one biblically through this marriage, but also that you're just going to have different problems with a different person.
Right.
And it is so much easier to not only carry that baggage, divide your family. And I've watched so many divorces, even in my sphere, occur, and you see so much division. But not only do you have difficulties, now you also have your past and your past spouse, and you're going to see your spouse for the rest of your life
That's
if you
right.
have children with them. So you're already going to be dealing with them the rest of your life. So how can you choose joy? How can you fight for the covenant, fight for your marriage? Because God has called us to that, because there is goodness in it.
Yeah, that's so good. Well, kind of that process, how does that begin? This whole burning your house down process, what's it look like in a marriage? Um, how's it get started?
Yeah, so often I'm sure you see this a lot, Dr. Kim, but it's not even always these big extravagant moments. It's not always a
Yeah.
betrayal or leaving for another partner. It's those small little flames. I refer to them as the small flames in the room that you're letting burn. And those are the little issues, the frustrations, the bitterness, the lack of forgiveness, the lack of emotional support, lack of consideration, the little things that eventually grow into a big flame. And in the first chapter of my book, I ask the question, because I think it's very important to truly sit and consider, if you had little flames in your real home that were burning, would you allow them to just sit? Or would you do everything you could to get rid of them, or to
Sure.
solve them, or to find an understanding of where they're coming from? You would absolutely do that. You would take the time to fix it. And if your house were completely burning down, wouldn't you do everything in your power to save it? Why not do the same for the most important relationship in your life? This relationship outlasts your children, right? Your
Yeah.
children will leave the home. You will be empty nesters. So why are we not fighting for it? Finding buckets of water, talking to people, asking for help, and seeking that out. And so I would just challenge the listeners, what are the little flames that are burning? Because it's the little issues, the neglect, the things left unsaid that end up causing the division. And we ignore these warning signs a little bit. We allow our tone to change. We allow
Hmm.
our conversations to become transactional. We do not pursue sex and intimacy anymore, or we withhold it as like a punishment. And then we allow these small things to create massive issues, because that's where temptation comes in. That's where we're like, I want to be seen by somebody else. And if you're feeling that, if you are feeling unseen, unwanted, it's very easy for the enemy to get in and to get a foothold and say, well, there's something else out there. You have social media dating apps now. It's so easy and at our fingertips to really just walk away from something that is a commitment to one another and before God. And so most people don't fall apart because they stop caring about one another. A lot of the time they still care about one another. It's that they stop considering one another.
That's so good. Yeah, I think there's just so many options out there that people get intrigued with, and now obviously I think the enemy throws all those there. I mean, Satan doesn't like Christian marriages
Yeah.
and does everything he can to destroy them, and so we
Mhm.
see so many things that um, could be, social media can be used for good, but it can also
Mhm.
be used to do some things that are not going to be good for your marriage
Yeah.
relationship. And so I think we have to realize we're vulnerable, and I think too, just that what you're talking about, just that commitment of saying, "Hey, I made a vow before the Lord
Mhm.
with my spouse, and it was
Mhm.
forever." And obviously there's reasons you've kind of hit at that. There's abuse. There's
Right.
reasons certainly that people have to be safe and take care of themselves.
Mhm.
But in general, I just see couples give up so easy.
Mhm.
The 2 or 3 years ago, the stat was there were more divorces in the first year of marriage than ever before. And I think, wow,
Mhm.
whatever it was, some little bump that
Mhm.
made them say, I'm out.
Yeah.
And as you know, just what you were saying with you and Jesse, you got to go through some fires to get
Mhm.
there. I mean, you go through things to grow and learn about each other, and it is a refining. And I think when we put God at the center, we're better, our marriage is better,
Yeah.
and for us, our relationship with God is better because we've
Mhm.
seen Him walk with us through those things and give us answers that we had no idea how to get if we hadn't
Absolutely.
put Him into it, you know?
Well, and isn't that the lie though? Because I love how you're saying that you really do have to go through fires. I think the lie that we believe so quickly and easily is that it's supposed to be easy. It's supposed to be flameless, and that's just not the
Yeah,
reality. You have two sinners coming together expecting perfection, essentially expecting this other person to be all of the things that they actually can't ever fulfill within you.
right.
Jesus is the only one who can fulfill that in our heart, but so often, and I find myself doing this as well, is seeking my peace from Jesse, seeking my happiness from Jesse, seeking my joy from Jesse, seeking like all of these little areas, seeking even my own self-worth and security. He cannot provide those things to
Yeah,
me. He is unable, your spouse is unable to give you a sense of self-worth because that is not where they're meant to, that's not what they're meant to fulfill. That is only the role of Jesus. But when we have this expectation that's up here, that's
you're
so
right.
high, and then they disappoint us, we feel like they're a failure. But the reality, a lot of the time, is that our expectations are unrealistic of who our
Mhm.
spouse is. Now, granted, there are areas where I think, I look at the bumps in the road, and I know that many listeners likely feel this way, where it genuinely feels impossible. It genuinely feels suffocating, or like you're losing yourself, or like you no longer have the fight in you. You can't do it, and
Mhm.
you feel like you're the only one trying. And that can feel very, very difficult. And that's also the purpose of Don't Burn Your Own House Down, is to give really practical, implementable tips and tools to guide you through that feeling, the feeling of, I don't even know what else to do. And a lot of that is deepening your own faith, finding your own autonomy and discipline, and knowing that strengthens you and it shifts the expectations on your partner. But like you're saying, Dr. Kim, hard is a reality of marriage. And the more we
Yeah.
understand that, the less we feel like we need to just throw our hands up.
Yeah, I agree. I was just thinking, you know, one of the first cartoon movies little girls watch is Cinderella, and they live happily ever after, and that gets planted real it looks like, "Wow, this was pretty easy. She got away from the evil stepmother. She's going
Yep.
off with him, and the rest of her life is perfect."
It's perfect.
And
Yep.
and then at Carrollton now we see it through social media and reels, and we think, "Oh my gosh,
Mhm.
look at that perfect family. If I had a husband like him, a wife like him,
Mhm.
I'd be happy like they are too." Well,
Yeah.
you don't see the other 10 photos when they were fighting and screaming and trying to get their kids to smile at the same time, we
Yeah.
just don't see the reality of that. So, no,
Right.
I think that's really true. So, a lot of things I think, I don't think anybody ever steps out and says, "I'm gonna wreck my marriage. I'm gonna," you know, but things kinda begin to happen, and sometimes I think, like you said, we ignore them. Do you feel like maybe a 2 or 3 things that you see are easily ignored in a marriage that can lead to some real problems down the line?
Yeah. One of the things that I will touch on, because I do believe this is such a modern issue, and that was a huge part of the book, is dealing with really modern present day issues, is technoference. And this is a term coined by a researcher named Brandon McDaniel, and it refers to technology replacing presence. So
Mhm.
this is, we have an assumption that because we're in the same room as a person that we're being present, but we know that that's not actually true. And the problem is now that we've become so hooked and addicted to this dopamine source, which is our phones, that the presence of another person can be boring. It can be less enticing. It gives less of a reward, a basic normal conversation. So then we think something is wrong. And I think that that's just
Mm.
really fascinating in my research. And when we allow technology to repeatedly interrupt real connection, like we have our phone out on the table while we're eating dinner, and if somebody pings us, we're picking that up. That's communicating to our spouse, hey, this person or this phone is more important than you are. And it may be subtle, but it's these micro moments that we're picking up on that is creating division. If we're scrolling while our spouse is talking, this is something I was very guilty of, and I had to catch myself. My husband is a talker. And I love that. And I loved that about him while dating. But
Hmm.
now I've realized I'm a busy bee, and a motivated person, and I'm always doing something, that he would be talking and I would think to myself, well, he could tell me this story because he's told me it maybe a couple times, and I can equally get my work done. That is not true.
Mm.
Not only is he interpreting my distraction as his story being insignificant, unimportant, that my time with him is not important, I'm also communicating that to him. And my own body language is saying, hey, this isn't valuable enough, that my phone is more valuable. So I'm teaching both of us something in that moment. And it's really harmful. And we see, I mean, a lot of studies are showing that almost 50% of couples are going to bed while scrolling on their phones, and that they are back to back. They're not facing one another. They're not kissing. So the technoference is a huge, huge issue. And there's a whole chapter about doom scrolling where I go into not only the psychology of this and the research of this, but also how it's impacting us. And I give a lot of mindset shifts to help us get out of the addiction, because I know how hard it can be.
Sure.
Secondly, I would say greeting one another when you come home. This is a
Mm.
lost art. We are so busy in our worlds, and we have children and we have responsibilities and laundry. It's very easy to walk in the door, hand a laundry basket to your partner and say, hey, I need this done, or the kids need you, or even to give off a heart, or like a demeanor of frustration because
Hmm.
you've been gone all day and you've been home with the kids, or whatever it might be. There's so many reasons to not. But what I want to challenge readers and listeners to do is to greet one another, to give that 6-second eye contact that the Gottmans say boosts the oxytocin in your brain, which is essentially the joy, the bonding hormone. 6 seconds of eye contact. Say hello. How are you? How was your day? Give a
Yeah.
kiss. 6-second kiss also ideally, and just be present with one another so that your children see the importance of the marriage. You're not neglecting your children by not saying hello to them first. They're seeing biblically your marriage is first. And when your marriage is first, it pours out onto your children. They're able to see the love, see the prioritization, see the care and intentionality of the relationship. And that is what they'll take into their marriage. So it's a gift for them. But it also stops the world around you and gives you the ability to say, hey, you matter to me.
Hmm.
This matters
Yeah.
to me. And I genuinely believe it sets the tone for the rest of the evening versus giving demands. And
Absolutely.
lastly, I would say, I think that not making time for intimacy and playfulness is so important. And when you go back to your dating, at least for us, there was so much joy, and talking on
Hmm.
the phone until 3 in the morning, and, not wanting to hang up, and dancing and playing and games and laughter, and with children and bills and all that, it gets lost in the shuffle. But the what I would challenge is the healthy marriages, the happy marriages are the ones who don't allow that. They don't allow stagnancy. They don't accept that for themselves. They say, I will not accept this for our marriage. I want playfulness. And they push it into the relationship, meaning they
Hmm.
plan for it. They find ways to do things that they used to love doing together. We play Mario Kart a lot. That's a big thing for us. I love spontaneous dates where we restaurant hop and we go one restaurant for appetizers, one for entree, one for dinner. And not only does that playfulness give joy and freedom, it bonds the friendship and it bonds the sexual intimacy, because when you feel safe and vulnerable with one another, when you're looking in one another's eyes, when you're laughing, it gives you that sense of dopamine. It boosts your oxytocin and
Yeah.
serotonin. So then you're feeling, oh, this is a good thing. This is a good thing. And I want to, you've already shown that vulnerability. So then showing vulnerability in the bedroom feels less daunting, especially in a difficult season.
Yeah. That's all three of those are so good, so important. You've kind of given a template of things you can do that will keep you on the right track.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think all those are issues that every single couple deals with. I had a couple It's a couple of years ago, but we had been talking about the phone and not using it as
Mhm.
much, and we were had just started a session, and his phone pings, and he picks it up, and I thought she was gonna kill him right there in my
Yeah.
office. It was like, we
Yeah.
we have been working on this, and we were in counseling, and you just picked up your phone. Uh,
Mhm.
he did never do
It
it again, I
communicates
promise.
something.
It
Yeah,
it it
it really
does, and I
does.
don't
Yeah.
even if I'm at lunch with, a guy or something, and there's just something if they pick up their phone when it pings
Yeah.
or something, it's like, "Why
Mhm.
am I here?" I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
and especially to do that to your spouse,
Mhm.
it just sends such a negative message, and I think that's one that I think every couple probably struggles with now,
Yeah.
is how do you what part does the phone play in your life?
Mhm.
And for most of it's gonna be too much.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, we see this in our parenting as well, and it's a really big
Yeah.
concern of mine as I watch dynamics, and not in a judgment way, but in a, gosh, like, what can we do? How can we stop this from being the memory of our children, that they're looking up at their parent and all they see is the back of their phone. They're not even seeing their eyes, and the children are not, playing with children on the floor is not the most interesting thing in the world to some people. And so it's easier to pick up the phone. And I think that that's what we have to really fight against. And I just challenge the listeners that it is easier to do this thing. It's easier to pick up your phone when you're bored. It's easier to pick up your phone
Mhm.
instead of having the hard conversation with your partner. It's easier than playing Barbies on the floor. But when you get to the end of your life, what will you wish you had done differently? And I genuinely believe our generation is going to say, I wish I had spent less time on my phone. I wish I had spent less time looking in the lives of people I don't even know versus looking into the eyes of the people that I care about.
Yeah, I don't want at my funeral to somebody say, "God, he was the best scroller I ever met."
Yeah. Yeah.
He could have
Amen.
blocked everything else out. No, no,
Yeah.
that's not what we want at all. I think all these kinda lead into the next thing I wanted to ask you about, and that's just being lonely in a marriage, because
Yeah.
these things I think all can, if we're not doing them or we're not doing things right, it can lead to where we feel like, "Oh my gosh, I'm in a marriage." I had a lady tell me one time, she said she'd been married about 3 years. She said, "I wish I was still single,
Yeah.
because when I was single, my expectations weren't that somebody's in the house with me that's gonna be go through life with me. But now my spouse is in another room, and he could be with me." And I thought,
Mhm.
"Wow, that is so true." And it kinda
Yeah.
helped me years ago think about the loneliness in marriage. What do you
Mhm.
see in that?
I see it very often. I think this is actually one of the things that has pushed me into this as well. And I'll talk about the walkaway wife in a minute because it's very prevalent. But one thing that I have felt this myself. This is something that Jesse and I have really navigated, because he is somebody who can find a hobby and he will give his whole world to that hobby.
Mm,
And he has a really hard time and he would share this and has shared this on the podcast, but has a really hard time creating boundaries. And my expectations are extremely high. So that combination is very, very tough. And I think that that has been something where I've had to find balance and finding autonomy and building friendships that matter, building a
mm.
career that matters, leaning into my children, working out, taking care of my body and my mind, finding that. And I do have a whole chapter as well on self-discipline, because I think that it is so crucial for us to have this discipline to take care of ourselves in a way that, they say, like, the single glow up or the divorce glow up. You turn into the best version of yourself when you get divorced.
Yeah.
Why are we not doing that for the person we've committed our lives to? They only get one wife or one husband. They want the most exceptional version of you. Why are we withholding that from our partner? And that comes with chasing our dreams, doing the things that we love, finding joy in the day to day moments, because nobody wants to be around a negative, miserable person all the time either. And so if your expectation is of this person and then they're disappointing you, you're going to have a sense of, I'm miserable here. I'm lonely here. But if you're both building your lives and then can come together in that life building, it really is a joy. So I believe that that's important. I also want to share a quote by Esther Perel. I respect her. She's a renowned, marriage researcher. And she says, "We seek a soulmate to provide everything an entire village once did." She says, this is the ideology. Give me belonging. I want my partner to give me
Mhm.
belonging, give me identity, give me continuity, but give me transcendence and mystery and awe all in one. Give me comfort, give me edge, give me novelty, give me familiarity, give me predictability, give me surprise. We have never invested more in love, and we have never divorced more in the name of love. So
Mhm.
I believe that expectations really form a lot of this loneliness, which is what my experience has been that I have navigated.
Sure.
Granted, boundaries need to be set for a partner if they are too busy with work, with their phone, with their hobbies. They also have to create a sense of boundaries so that they're honoring their partner because, again, this person has chosen to spend their life with you. So it's really tough to navigate because you want to love well. You want to be loved well. You want to feel seen and cared for. And when you don't, it's easy to withdraw. But I think
Mhm.
that managing expectations, managing your own life, your own faith, leaning into Jesus and trusting Him to fulfill that in you, trusting Him to give you a path, trusting Him to redeem those areas and not trying to fix your spouse all the time, while also creating healthy boundaries. Those are all really important things. And I lean into those a lot more in Don't Burn Your Own House Down. But one story I want to share, if it's okay, that I
Sure.
talk about in Make the Dane Coffee, which is probably one of my favorite chapters, is a conversation I had with my late grandma. And I had asked her, she had been married over 50 years. And I asked her, what, if you could give me one thing, what, I'm always picking the brains of people who've gone before me. I'm fascinated by what works and what doesn't work. And she said, Lindsay, I genuinely feel that the best thing we ever did was to compete with one another. And I asked what she meant. I was like, what does that look like? She said, we did it. We competed. Your grandpa and I competed for our entire marriage to outserve one another. We did everything that we could to, it was a game. It was a fun competition. It was never malicious. It was never to prove our point or to kind of score
Mhm.
keep, or it was to show the other that we did it. So she would go out and clean his car before he woke up. And then he would notice that she had cleaned his car. So she'd come in and he'd do all the dishes. So she'd go iron his clothes and he'd go and bake her a dessert or work in her garden. And it was this way of life. And they bickered. Like, of course they bickered. It was not
Sure.
perfect, but the love that they have to outserve, for me, is like such an example of Jesus. Jesus came not to
Yeah.
be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom of many, for many, as scripture says. And also, one of the greatest loves that we can give is to lay down our lives for our friends. And so that selflessness, that servitude, Romans calls us to outdo one another in showing honor. When we're doing these things and doing them well, it genuinely makes such an impact in the lives. And so while we can be focused very heavily, as I have, on my loneliness in certain seasons, I would challenge the person who maybe is feeling that way to take a step back and say, how can I serve my partner? How can I outdo them in showing honor? How can I go above and beyond in doing something they would never expect? And this concept I shared on my social media on Instagram at Living Easy with Lindsay, and it blew up. It was like over 2 million views, and it was really widely shared. But a lot of the comments were, this would be great if my partner would also do this, but I'm going to end up being the one. And I think that that's where I would say, give it a shot anyway.
Yeah.
It has to start somewhere. So if it starts with you, let it start with you. Your reward is in heaven. You're not doing this because, even if you feel like they don't deserve it or they haven't earned it, Jesus calls you to a standard. He calls you to live above reproach. He calls you to love, again, not in cases of abuse or of betrayal, but in normal day-to-day frustrations. How can you be the light of Jesus? How can you show the love of Christ and let his word flow in and flow out of the way that you live? You will be shocked. I truly believe you'll be shocked at how your partner responds to that selfless care and consideration. But we don't do it with the expectation of that, right? We do it with the
Right.
expectation of honoring the Lord so that we don't feel defeated if it does not come back our way. But many marriages that I have talked with, worked with, I'm not a licensed therapist. This has just been my love and my joy for 10 years
Yeah.
to meet with people and to see into their lives, is you see that servitude genuinely makes such a difference.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think what you kind of hit on it there at the end. I think when you can look at it like, this is what God would want me to do for my
Yeah.
spouse. And so then for me, my obedience goes to God each
Mhm.
day. At the end of the day, hey, I think I served the way you wanted me to today. To me, that has made all the difference in the world.
Mhm.
Nancy usually reciprocates. I
Mhm.
reciprocate usually with her. We figured that out over all these years.
Mm.
But even if she doesn't, it's like, I just did what God wanted me to do. And
Yeah.
that for me has become enough.
Mm.
And I think you're right. We have these expectations. Well, if I do this, this, and this, or if, you know, we wanted to talk about scorekeeping. We'll talk about that in a
Mhm.
minute. But I think those kind of things enter into it. And we just don't, I don't know. I think what you said of just give it a try. Give
Yeah.
it a try, be consistent. And I think if you're both wanting a good marriage, your spouse is somehow that's going to click for them at some point.
Right.
And just don't give up. Just don't give
Mhm.
up because you're not doing something that's hurting your marriage. You're doing something that's really good for your marriage. And you've
Mhm.
got to continue to look at the purity of that. This
Yeah.
is just no expectations. This is because I made a commitment, a covenant. I love my spouse,
Mhm.
and I want our marriage to be better.
Yeah. Really good. Yeah. I agree.
So let's talk into scorekeeping.
Yes.
How do they get into that? How do you break free? I think it's so prevalent in so
Mhm.
many marriages of just, yeah,
Yeah.
I've been nice for 3 days, so I'm not being nice, so you're nice for 3 days.
Yeah.
It's all those
Yeah.
things.
It creates so much division, and I really believe that the scorekeeping specifically is an area where the enemy can steal so much of your joy and so much of your unity. And I think a lot of that comes, Dr. Kim, from fear. It's fear and it's a lack of honesty. And I say that because I think when we are sensing tension in a relationship, or we're sensing that something's not being reciprocated, or we're sensing that maybe they're becoming less attached, they're detaching, they're separating, we then not want to, but I think it's our natural tendency to maybe to villainize them, to see them
Mm,
as you're doing something intentionally harmful. And instead of communicating one issue, the big concern, the big fear, we start tallying in our heads, oh, you never do this, you always do this, I always do this, I take out the trash. And it's when we also, and I notice this is a big pattern, when we stop praising the good and speaking good into the person and instead only speak out the critiques. And there's a saying, speak to the prince and a king will appear. When we
hmm
speak to our partner as a prince instead of as a failure, we see them flourish and become that version of themselves. It's inevitable. You speak life or you spit poison, one or the other into your marriage. And the scorekeeping is spitting poison because you're essentially critiquing them. And I said it this way, we say someone has an affair and you've chosen to forgive and you've said, okay, we're going to move forward from this. We're going to fight. And there's going to be long suffering on the person who had the affair side, and a lot of perpetual forgiveness on the person who was the victim of the affair. That will happen. But what happens when we are unwilling to forgive or we hold resentment is we say, okay, well, you had an affair and you didn't unload the dishwasher. It's the elephant in the room. You had the affair and you talked to me like this. You had the affair.
mm,
So we're tagging it onto past mistakes. We're keeping that record of wrongs that scripture calls us to not have. Love keeps no record of wrongs. So when we're holding on to this record, we're usually tagging on these little things to the big issue. So it's a lack of
hmm
communication. So my encouragement would be right now, if you find yourself just like the little annoyances, what are you tagging them onto? What is the real issue here that needs to be communicated and addressed, even if it's scary, even if it's vulnerable, even if it's hard, so that you don't create this bitterness? Because what this does is you start to see them and characterize them based on what they are not doing
Yeah.
and what they're failing at. And you then become contemptuous, which Dr. John Gottman says is one of the greatest predictors of divorce is contempt, sarcasm, smirking,
Yeah.
name calling, frustration, because you lose respect for them. And what I have noticed in myself is when I start to lose respect, A lot of the time, it's because I am unwilling to see the good. I'm unwilling to praise the good. I'm unwilling to call my partner up, to try to be one together instead
Hmm.
of I'm better than you. I do this better than you. And I esteem myself higher than I should. And scripture, I mean, God hates pride, right? Scripture is so clear how destructive pride
Yeah.
can be. And scorekeeping, the root of scorekeeping, I believe, is pride, of is saying you always, you always, you always, I
Hmm.
never. And it's an agreement in our marriage. And I talk about this in the communication section of the book, but to never say those words. We never say
Yeah.
never to one another, and we never say always, because it's so generalized and it puts them into a box that they don't belong in.
Hmm. No, I think all that is so good. I mean, and I think too, one of the things that we've learned about as we learn more about the brain is the neuroplasticity of it. And so if you are, if you're identifying with what Lindsay's been saying about all the negative things, you can change that. You can reframe and you can begin. And I think for me, in working with people, asking God to help you in that.
Mm-hmm.
God, I'm framing my spouse in a negative way. I
Mm-hmm.
feel this way or that way about him. I want to change that. And I think when you partner with God in that, I think He shows up, and I
Right.
think you're going to begin to do that. And so it does take effort, takes
Mhm.
intentionality, but like you said, you can do that, and it's going to
Mhm.
get you. I mean, thinking negative about a spouse for 40 years is not why you got married. I
Yeah.
mean, you get married to just be miserable. Someone you get
Mhm.
married with someone to continue to do the things that you fell in love with and to grow that. And
Mhm.
so I think the way we look at our spouse is so important, and to realize wherever it is, it can change.
Yeah, and like you're saying, the 40 years of misery really falls on you. You're the lack of forgiveness, resentment with a lack of
Right.
forgiveness. It's the common saying, lack of forgiveness or unforgiveness is drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. They're largely unaffected by your unwillingness to forgive them, but your heart is hurting, your heart is aching. And I think that it's the willingness to say, "Hey, I have been forgiven of so much. Jesus has forgiven me of so many sins, so many wrongs. This holy, holy God. Who am I to say I can't forgive my sinful partner as a sinful person?" And to say, I see your brokenness, but I also give you grace. I give you grace. And this, like you're saying, Dr. Kim, this comes from the Holy Spirit. This willingness and ability to give grace flows solely from Jesus, because it's not in our flesh to just give out this grace endlessly. That is a reliance upon God. And that's where the faith and the autonomy of that faith, and saying, God, I have this relationship with you, this deep, intimate
Hmm.
relationship with you that is so powerful that it has no choice but to pour out and over onto my marriage.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so good. I want to switch it just a little bit
Yeah.
because this is something I see come up in the counseling room quite a bit. That we'll start working, and maybe it's the husband, and so he's loud. Maybe he screams. Maybe he yells. Maybe he whatever, and so he changes these behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
And so a month or two later, he's saying, "But I'm not yelling anymore. I'm not doing this and not that." But the marriage is still struggling
Mm-hmm.
because I think the wife, you can't, I guess what I'm saying, you can't just change behavior and expect everything, because behavior modification, that just doesn't work in a marriage. Uh,
Temporary. Yeah,
yeah,
it
it's so
is.
temporary.
Yeah, I see this a lot as well. I mentioned the walkaway wife syndrome, and this is another thing that blew up on social media. People really resonated with this. And what the walkaway wife syndrome is essentially a woman who has communicated, and this can be a walkaway husband as well, but it tends to be a wife, has communicated and communicated and communicated her needs over and over and over again. And the husband does not take it seriously. He does not hear her and the needs that she has. He's unwilling to do the work, or he just doesn't think they're as important as she does, until she has already grown so tired and so she's so brokenhearted that she then becomes silent. And a lot of people say, when a woman is nagging, 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 she cares. She wants to fight. She's trying to work toward the marriage. And
Mm.
that's not an excuse to nag. It's just,
No.
it's to say when they're pleading, right? I guess not nagging.
Yeah.
When they're pleading for change and they're communicating their needs, that's when they care. But when a woman grows silent, it's often because she's become so tired of having to ask for the same thing over and over again, and seeing it shift, like you're talking about, seeing it shift for a month and then it goes back to normal again, that she then eventually walks away. But then the husband is left confused because he's blown away that she would walk away because he doesn't understand where the problem lies, but he didn't hear her for all of those years. And this is a huge, very common cause of divorce. And so what you see is, like you're saying, the behavioral modification is a shift in action. Okay, I will stop playing video games for a month. I will stop doing these things, but the heart remains the same. There's this thing called heart rot, and it happens in trees. I believe it's redwood trees, but I've always found it really fascinating. The first time I heard about it was from Pastor Matt Chandler. And essentially, heart rot happens to a tree where there are small cuts in the tree itself, and fungus gets into the tree and starts to create like breakdown. It essentially breaks down the tree. And so, but what you don't see it happening at all because it's happening internally. And over time, the decay begins. And it's just like a marriage. Those little incisions, those little cuts, those little damages, the little words or moments where you're ignored really create this opportunity for temptation to come in, for bitterness, for resentment, for contempt to come in. But the tree, when you look at it from the outside, it looks perfectly fine, which is what we see on social media. We see people who are smiling and it's just a muscle that's moving and we assume everything is great. But like you said, we're not seeing the behind the scenes. And so over time, with this redwood, you can walk up to it and you can touch it and it will completely fall to the ground, though it looked completely sturdy on the outside because the internal is so damaged. And that is what's happening to so many marriages is we're going to church and everyone's asking how we're doing and we say we're great. We're not sharing the hard because there's this shame. We're internalizing shame over brokenness in our marriages, not realizing everyone is feeling some difficulty, some hardship. And so when we are willing to be more open and to go to our spouse and say, hey, these are very real issues to me. This is damaging our relationship. Please take this seriously. We go to counseling because we notice whether it's preventative or, we're dealing with the fire damage, we're going to talk to somebody. We're opening up to community groups. We're going to couples who have gone before us. And these are things that Jesse and I have done our entire marriage. We have always had some form of counselor, whether it's preventative, just because we want to learn from them, or because we're in a tough season, we go to them to avoid that heart rot from that internal stress and decay from happening to us. And so your behavior can look great from the outside. We can do these little things, but until we are seeking Christ as our foundation, as the core of why we do what we do, that we are working for the glory of God, that this is a ministry to others, that this is something that we are showing the world can be done differently because of the strength and the power of the Holy Spirit, that we know, yes, the world says this, but let me show you how good my God is. That is where the difference lies. And we cannot spiritually lead a partner who does not want to be spiritually led. I have spiritually led my home for years at a time when my husband was struggling with his faith. It wasn't something I wanted to do. I didn't want to lead my children. I didn't want to be the one. I wanted to be led. But it taught me something. The Holy Spirit used that to sanctify me, to make me stronger, to make me more like Jesus. And my husband has led me in seasons of drought in my faith. And so it's this companionship, this willingness to come together, to not drag the other person. And I guess I would encourage the audience. Like, I just feel like God's placing this on my heart. It's so easy to drag the other person through the mud when they're falling. And when you love someone, you don't think that that's natural, but when they're failing you and you get involved, you want to point them back to you. They're being drugged through the mud and you're like, well, you're not doing this for me. You're not doing this for me. And there they are like, hey, I'm struggling with my career. I'm struggling with finances. I'm struggling with showing up as a person. I feel so much weight, and you're adding weight on, and you're doing it because you're hurting. But what Jesus does is he comes alongside with compassion and understanding and says, I get it. I get it. Go and sin no more, but also let's work through this together. And so instead of adding that burden on and expecting the go and sin no more to happen immediately, you go to someone who you can talk with and that can help you, but you also have grace knowing they're a human being. They're struggling too. They have their
Right.
own world that they're navigating while also trying to satisfy you as their spouse. So how can we just have this sense of love, this unconditional love, where we look at that person as a person and as their own, struggling human, and say, hey, I see you and I love you and I don't condemn you. Let's work through this together so that we can be even stronger as a
Mm.
couple, as a ministry, and we can be an even greater example of the powerful work that God has done within us.
Yeah, that's so good. It's so good. I love the example of the redwood tree because
Yeah.
I think that's such a typical picture of what I see in marriages, and uh, I've never had anybody I think that I worked with in counseling, unless they were fairly newlyweds, that didn't say, "I wish we would have come in a year earlier or
Yeah.
5 years earlier." I had a lady one time said, "Tell me, somebody gave me your name 12 years ago," and I
Mm.
thought, "Wow, we would have had
Yeah.
so much less to deal with at that
Yeah.
time." And one of the things you said kind of early, but I just want to say to the guys, if your wife is talking to you, listen, because
Mm.
I think our wives tell us over and over what they need and what they want and um, what's going to make the marriage better. And I think when we continue to ignore that, I think the wife goes silent, like you said. And then I think once a wife is done, it is really hard because
Mhm.
she's given and given and given to restart again,
Mhm.
because she's tried and tried and tried. And almost every situation I've seen where that has happened, the husband's like, "Well, you never said anything." And she's
Mhm.
going, "Oh, I've been telling you
I
for
have been.
years what
Yeah.
I needed." And so just guys, listen to our wives. One, what I learned is Nancy has more insight into making a relationship better than I do in our
Mm.
marriage. And she has so much wisdom. And when I began to value that early in our marriage, it made all the difference in the world. But if I hadn't listened to her, she might have gone silent at some point
Mhm.
because
Yeah.
she thought he's not hearing what I'm saying.
Mhm.
But that's not what we want in a marriage
Yeah, both
at all.
partners have so much value to add. And when we
Yeah.
see it in that way, I have a chapter on companionship and a chapter on partnership, and don't burn your own house down, because they're both really important. You can have a dog as a companion, right? You also need a partner, a teammate within the house who's willing to take on some of the emotional burdens with you. And emotional labor is a huge issue where women feel like they're doing everything. And a lot of the time, the sexual issues within a relationship stem from a woman feeling so burnt out that she has nothing left to give. And so
Yep.
you realize when you come together to do these things, you both have benefits and the marriage is benefited. It really, it takes two, it does.
I
It
love
takes two.
Yeah. I love one of the quotes that you put that are from the book, which says, "If molehills feel like mountains, bitterness has taken hold," which is so true. And we've talked about a lot of things, but what happens when somebody's listening and they're saying, "Yeah, that bitterness is there.
Yeah.
Expectations weren't met, this thing over time." What do you do when you get to that?
Yeah, I think that you begin by praying together. And
Mhm.
there are so many studies that show, I wish I had one on hand, but that show the power of prayer together, because it bonds the right hemisphere of the brain, which is the goal within a relationship, to bond the right hemisphere of the brain to come together and say, hey, these are the things I care about. And I think that partners hear one another differently as well when they're praying together, because they hear it's a very vulnerable act to pray
Yeah,
out loud for your
absolutely.
needs, for your desires. And it also is extremely strengthening to a marriage. And so it can be tough when you have one partner who's unwilling, and that's fine. Sometimes you bring them along and you do it anyway. You pray for both of you. One thing that Jesse and I have done is that we will read one chapter of the Bible together a night in bed. And this is to replace our habit of doom scrolling on our phones. And then we each pray over one another. And then we, of course, pray for our marriage. And it's been so life giving, I think, to both of us
Mhm.
to see the other person. Again, it really takes this kind of blindfold off of our eyes and helps us to see the other person as they are in a vulnerable state, like as a little kid, who were you, who did you want to grow up to be, what did you
Yeah.
envision? And it softens you. And I think that that's the core, is not only is Jesus going to work through those prayers, he's going to hear your heart, but you're also shifting your heart toward God and toward one another. And we're keeping him at the center. And when he is at the center, your own pride matters less. It really does. And
Yeah.
so the bitterness, and not to say, I mean, there is some very real hurt within marriages. And if you have walked through that, I'm so sorry. I have many friends who've walked through very, very, very tumultuous affairs, painful betrayal, divorce. It's horrible. It is absolutely horrible. And I'm so sorry. And I think that alongside that, I've also watched marriages, as I said earlier, be redeemed from that. I have seen God work in a way that their marriage is genuinely, I've watched them for years, stronger than it ever was before the affair.
Yeah.
And so I know that it's possible, but it absolutely, I don't believe is possible without surrendering to Jesus and coming to that place. And so it's choosing to forgive for whatever that is that you're holding, again, to let that go and to know this isn't a dismissal of what they've done. It's not even an acceptance of what they've done or forgetting what they've done. You're solely saying, I don't want to carry this in my heart anymore. I want to honor God in forgiving that 70 times, 7 times, which is not a
Mhm.
math equation. It's to say really endlessly, because you've been forgiven for so much. And then to move toward Jesus and away from ourselves, like to stop looking in the mirror so much at us and to go first in softening and saying, okay, what is the next step? Is it counseling? Is it confession? Is it removing shame, getting like shame off of me mindset and saying, Lord, we're going to be so fully vulnerable and open in order to get to this place that you have called us to.
Yeah, that's so good. Prayer has played a huge part in our marriage,
Mm,
and Nancy originally initiated it on our wedding night, for one
mm,
thing. And uh, but if my pastor Craig Rochelle asked me one time, what if you could tell couples one thing that would make the biggest difference, and I said prayer, and I
yeah.
think that's true. I mean, we can talk about communication, all these other things,
Mhm.
but prayer, just like you described it so beautifully, there is something about praying together with your spouse that um, that connects you
Yeah.
in such a deep way,
Mhm.
and it's powerful. And to hear what's on my wife's heart through prayer
Mhm.
as she prays to God, and hopefully she hears the same thing when I pray. Um, there is something that just makes my love grow for her,
Mhm.
and and this desire to protect this marriage God's given us.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like
It like
this is
tunes me
really
in.
special. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I notice that at the like, especially the dinner table, when my husband will pray and he'll kind of lean into whatever is going on in his world or what he's hopeful for our family. I think I hear it differently. And I just would
Yeah.
encourage spouses, like, really listen. Listen. My husband always says, you have two ears and one mouth for a reason. Listen to one another and care about what they care about. Because when you care about what they care about, it's really tough to detach or separate or be disconnected because you're leaning into what matters to them.
Yeah, there's so much wisdom in that, and valuing what our spouse says,
Hmm.
and so many times I see couples or one spouse discount the other spouse, and that just does so much damage
Yeah.
to a relationship over time. So, if you could tell couples as we kind of wind up,
Hmm.
okay, they're listening to this and they say, I want to fireproof my marriage.
Hmm.
I want to do it. Maybe there's a few flames, maybe there's a few things. If you're going to give them a couple of steps to start with, what would you say?
Yeah. I would say evaluate. Number one, start by evaluating the core issue. What is at the root of the thing? It's not the dishes, it's not the laundry. Maybe it is. But if it is that just a lack of emotional help with the labor in the home? What is the core? Come down to that. I would also say, secondly, start by journaling. Don't communicate all of your
So good.
feelings, all of your anger to your spouse. Anger is a secondary emotion. It is covering up another emotion. So what is that emotion within you that is causing pain and frustration and eventually anger? And start journaling. I am somebody who struggles. I feel like I suffocate under the weight of unspoken words. And so I be like, "Oh my gosh, my husband said this and it's been bothering me for 30 minutes. I have to tell him what he said." That has obviously caused a lot of issues in our relationship because I can't keep anything to myself. And I've learned the art of journaling and prayer in those moments to say, does this really hold weight? 3 days later, if it is still bothering me, okay, we can have that conversation. But does it need to be happening all the time? This is when you're dealing with some issues and you're not trying to tack on even more issues, because that's what that will do. You're just keeping that receipt list going. So journaling, and also journaling is so healthy for the mind, psychologically, for depression, for anxiety. It's very, very helpful. And then thirdly, I would say, let people into your life. Let people into your shame, let them into your circle, let them into your mess. After our largest fights, when we have had blowout fights, which I talk about our largest fight in chapter 2 of Don't Burn Your Own House Down, where I walked out after saying I would never get divorced. I was so worn. What we did in the 3 days that followed, the 3 days we were apart, was we both surrounded ourselves with people. We were in community. We were seeking truth. We were in God's word. We were trying to understand how we had gotten to this point. And I often say I would not still be married if it weren't for friends who let me cry on their floor and have these moments. It's not because my marriage is horrible. I'm very, very fortunate and have a wonderful husband, but it tests you. Marriage challenges
Absolutely.
you and it tests you. And you need people who can say, hey, us too. We're struggling too, or we've dealt with that too. And we always find that, like, we have a game night with couples and we'll bring something up that's been bothering us, just like jokingly or playfully. And they'll be like, oh my gosh, we dealt with that last year and here's what happened. I think lastly, I would say, and maybe most importantly, add fun back into your
Mm.
relationship. If you're trying to dissolve these issues by talking face to face all day, every day, you're going to destroy each other. You're going to wear one another out, especially if you don't see eye to eye on that situation or issue. Have fun. Go on a trip. Commit to date nights, make them a commitment, even if they're free. If your kids are sleeping and you have a picnic in your living room, it doesn't matter if you don't have babysitters, it doesn't matter if you don't have money. You can show priority to one another by doing little romantic things that you probably did when you were dating. Go through music catalogs you used to love, watch old movies you liked as kids. Like,
Mm.
there's so much you can do to find one another again, and be silly. Have dance parties in your house. Jesse has come home. I've had I can't remember what it's called, but the black stuff under my eyes and a Nerf gun, and I've attacked him with Nerf guns. Like, we have to keep fun going. Otherwise, it just feels like a weight and a responsibility. So even if they don't do it back, go first in softening and pursue that. And I think that those are, truly some. And then, of course, like I said before, committing nightly or every morning to start your day together in prayer and in action. Get outside in the sunshine, read the word together, pray together, and start your day or end your day in a way that honors the Lord and reminds you why you're doing this thing, why you're fighting for this marriage.
Yeah, all of those are so good. I was thinking when you said that some water.
I'll do the same. I'll join you.
Okay, we'll cut that out. A couple things. When you said that about having fun, there's so many times I'll look at a couple and I'll say, "What do y'all do for fun?" And it's like the deer in the headlight. And
Mhm,
so I'll go back, "Well, what did you do for fun when you were dating?" Oh my gosh, they can say
mhm.
thing after thing after thing, and I think that is so important to have
Yeah.
fun with your spouse. To
Mhm.
laugh together. I mean, sometimes Nancy and I laugh together so hard our stomachs hurt. I just
Yeah.
think I
I can
remember last year. I can't remember what we were laughing at. We're in the bedroom, and I walked out of the bedroom. I thought, I can't. I got to stop. I can't. I cannot keep laughing. It just hurts too much. Uh, and
Oh,
so I
that's
just having
amazing.
fun like that. And then I think I loved what you said about the 3 days or a period of time choosing your battles. And okay, if it bothers you, write it down, put
Yeah.
it in your journal, pray about it. And if it's 3 days later, if it's still, sure, maybe it's something you need to talk about.
Mhm,
But most of the time when couples come in, they can tell me about the fight they had. They can tell
mhm,
me about who threw what and all this kind of stuff.
mhm.
They'll say, well, what was it about? And they'll go, I don't know. They don't
Yeah.
even remember sometimes what the fight
It
was
wasn't
even
even of
about
any
because it
importance. It
wasn't
wasn't
that big
worth
a deal.
it. Yeah.
It wasn't worth it at all.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Great conversation.
Yeah, I enjoyed it so
Last
much. Thank you.
last question. What are you loving about your marriage right now?
Oh, we've had a year, if I'm honest. And I think writing this book, people warned me, like, hey, the enemy's going to attack your marriage
Yeah.
right now. And I didn't expect it in the ways that it's happened. And I talk more about that on my podcast, Living Easy with Lindsay. But I would say what I am really appreciating is resiliency and
Mm.
the ability to come back from things. One of the biggest things is that we're finding that we both like really different hobbies. My husband's really into pickleball right now, and that's not my thing, but he loves it. And I am, really leaning into writing and my work and hosting. And so, but what we've been doing so intentionally lately is instead of letting that pull us apart, we're saying, how can we allow these things to draw us together? And so I'm going and I'm watching him play pickleball, and I actually really enjoy it. It's very attractive to watch your spouse be really good at something and to be active, and like
Yeah.
it's great for us. And then he's leaning in and asking questions, about my books and about my work, and he's helping me to host. And he learned how to make like the most extravagant charcuterie board I've ever seen. That's far better than mine. And he does that for me because he knows I love hosting. It's a hobby of mine and I love people. And so I think it's the combination of seeing, hey, there were areas that could have really divided us. And these were things that I started
Mhm.
to feel afraid of. Like, hey, are we growing fully apart? Like, why are we so different now? We didn't used to be so different. And instead of letting it divide us, we're saying, hey, let's choose to be resilient. Let's choose goodness. Let's choose to see the good in these things for the other person and see one another as a human being and come back together and have fun with it as a couple. And it's just been really sweet.
That is so cool. That's cool. I love pickleball too. And
You
Nancy, thank
do?
goodness she does. She does. She played
Okay.
tennis for a long time
Okay.
before, and so we do it together. But yeah, I think we've always tried to find new things to do together, and then like you said, to try to support each other in the things that they're doing. And Nancy never really wanted to be a part of us in marriage, but as she's kind of, I think I said, well, just pray about it, which is
Mm.
always probably not fair because because I want God, because I know
Yeah.
what God's going to tell her. But she has enjoys it so much now, the things that she does with Awesome Marriage now, and so
No, I
yeah,
love
that makes
that.
so much sense, and
Yeah. Well, and
so
your
good.
marriage is such an example. Your books are phenomenal and have made an impact in our lives. And so I just want to say thank you so much, Dr. Kim, for
Oh,
having
that's
me. And it's been,
thank
yeah,
you,
it's an honor.
thank you, Lindsay. I appreciate that. I'm excited about the book. People, make sure you pick it up. It is "Don't Burn Your House Down,"
Yep.
and also you mentioned your podcast, or go ahead
Yes.
and talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. I've had this podcast a couple years now, and it's been a huge joy in my life. It's called the Living Easy Podcast, or Living Easy with Lindsay. I don't know if they can see us, but I have my little mug with my name on
Nice.
it. But yeah, I talk about faith and motherhood and marriage and relationship and kind of self growth and self awareness and just becoming essentially the best version of ourselves for the glory of God.
That's awesome. Thanks again
Thank you.
for being here today. Appreciate it. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you so much.
Hey, thanks for joining us on the podcast today. We have a great lineup for February for you. Nancy and I'll be talking next week about physical health and marital intimacy, why our bodies matter in marriage. Coming up is Dan Purcell on spiritual connection in marriage. I'll round out the month talking to you about 24/7, 365 foreplay. And coming up, Ron Deal joins us again, talking this time about blended families, Eric Kennedy, Ryan Wickerman, and so much more. We'll see you next time.